Hey, look, red, my favorite color. Adam Keeley, Philosophy, 110, 27th of April, 2011. Thought paper. Happiness should be society's highest ideal. If I could chat with Plato, I would ask him, why should I be reasonable? Why should I, and those around me, who together compose society, each individually do as he suggests and make reason our highest ideal instead of any other ideal? I would argue that the goal in practicing reason is ultimately a happy life full of joyous, mutually beneficial relationships. If you are already happy almost all the time and think you will continue to be the rest of your life, there seems to be no point in reading a philosophy paper any further, or studying any other subject for that matter. If you want to preserve, increase, and sustain your own happiness and joy in your relationships, then I would begin by consciously making happiness your goal in life. A fair question Plato might ask in return is, why should I make happiness my goal? Here my response would be similar to Aristotle, that happiness is to be desired for its own sake. Happiness doesn't seem to need a reason for desiring it. It is an end in itself, and something shared, attainable, and mutually beneficial to all people. Happiness compared to what? Happiness compared to depression. Natural joy instead of persistent sorrow. Relation, not abjection. The good life, not a life not worth living. Reason, logic, and evidence seem to be central to achieving happiness in personal and societal relationships. If you have an irrational, illogical view of reality, how can you have joyous relationships with yourself and the people who are part of that reality? If you believe in irrational, illogical views, concepts, or things, is it possible to be happy? I would have to say yes, but only if the notion isn't placed above reality. Before reason and evidence came to light that showed the earth is round, of course people could be happy. The problem arises when reality changes that view. If you place reason, logic, and evidence higher than the belief or conclusion itself, then you'll be ever more joyous as you go through the exciting uncertainty of throwing out the old and adopting an entirely new, radically different worldview. You'll be fascinated that you were so wrong and that this amazing idea is so correct. What does reality have to say about reality? There seems to be two views of reality dating back to Plato and Aristotle. One, Plato supposes that reality is a shadow of ideal forms, and the other, Aristotle's, supposes that forms are just a mental exercise, that things exist, and concepts derived from those things do not exist outside our minds. I have to agree with Aristotle here. There seems to be no way to logically suppose that reality doesn't exist, or that it is only a shadow of some higher realm. For one, arguing that position with someone would be absurd, since you are arguing reality doesn't exist, while you are assuming your opponent exists and is part of reality. And secondly, if you actually believe reality doesn't exist, or you are only a shadow interacting with shadows, why do anything at all? Why get out of bed in the morning? Why not act like a vegetable? There seems to be no other option besides accepting reality exists and that you are a part of it. How can the question of human nature be approached? What do the two main views, the avocado view and the artichoke view even mean? I think there can be much confusion or different ways to approach this topic, so I will approach the topic with a straightforward question. Do humans have a soul? The soul is considered something that lives within us, is a part of us, cannot be corrupted, damaged, or destroyed, and lives on after death, and is attested to by the avocado view. Approaching the topic this way, rationally there seems to be no logical reason to believe in a soul, for the same reason belief in Platonic forms are unjustified. Faith has to be invoked. Another way to look at human nature is the nature versus nurture debate. Are children entirely the sum of their experiences, or do they have innate qualities, attributes, or attitudes? Looking at the question this way, there seems to be truth to both. Nature gives all healthy humans a brain that is quite similar, and nurture determines to a large extent how that brain develops. The question of gods, karma, reincarnation, etc. can also be approached in different ways, but rationally there seems to be no difference between these ideas and a Platonic ideal or some form of soul. Both apparently can't be interacted with directly. Both exist as a higher form or in a higher realm, and both seem to be unjustifiable. No rational reason. Faith isn't rational. Pascal's wager. Logical proof, parentheses ontological, cosmological, theological arguments, etc., close parentheses, or evidence, or lack thereof, seems to be sufficient to justify a belief in these concepts, and at worst, the ideas themselves are self-contradictory. I would argue that the belief in God, or an appeal to faith, is an example of a person putting a belief or conclusion outside and above any appeal to reality. It's an irrational view, a speculation placed above truth, a bigoted opinion. If someone holds a particular opinion on the subject, their choices become limited. Their only options are to not talk about the subject, or only talk about it with people who share that particular view. Or if one does bring up the subject, you either agree to disagree or get mad at each other. Both of these options, I would insist, lead to unhappiness. If you decide to not talk about the subject, you can't be spontaneous, relaxed, and loose, which seem to be essential requirements for happiness. You can only be happy with people who share your view, but not as happy as you could be, since you have to split people into us and them, dissociating yourself from much of the human race. If you do talk about the subject, getting mad at each other obviously can't lead to happiness, but agreeing to disagree is more subtle. Agreeing to disagree seems to me to be a subversive form of forcing someone else not to talk about a subject. You are not only undermining your own spontaneity and happiness, but your friends as well. If individuals, and therefore society, made individual happiness the highest ideal, this might cause us to question the current political system. Democracy, even representative democracy, basically breaks down to the majority enforcing its will on the minority, and is based on the idea of the greatest good/happiness for the greatest number, instead of being based on individual happiness. Enforcing arbitrary rules on a minority who disagrees can't make them happy. If the minority was allowed to do what made them happy as individuals, or even choose not to have a ruler at all, democracy breaks down. Maybe this is a good thing. Maybe there is something better than democracy. I'm always willing to question. Imagine if nobody questioned if there was something better than the hand plow. Like the founders of America who questioned colonial rule by the British, skepticism is the first step to achieve something better. Problems arise when there is a minority whose individual happiness apparently depends on murdering people, but these problems might have answers we can't even dream of, just like people before the more or less free market couldn't have imagined the internet. In conclusion, a rational life, always open to honesty, curiosity, and openness, is the best kind of life to live if you want to be happy in your life and relationships. Always remember that happiness can't be willed or forced. With this in mind, we can become free in our relationship with ourselves, with our friends and family, and with our society.